Let's take it from the top.
I'm recording. All right.
Aurora, thank you for your infinite patience. All right, we're recording?
We're on.
Great. All right, welcome everybody. It's April 5th, 2022, and we're here on another spring session. Today, we're joined by Aurora, Alcaide. She's one of our alums at FIU Landscape Architecture. She graduated in 2018. And a little bit of the background on spring sessions, which you may or may not know, is we started this as a way to kind of open up conversations with alumni, industry leaders, professionals, and the short time that, I guess relatively speaking, you have been out in the professional world, I think one of the amazing things is where you began in school and where you have gone, and I want to know a little bit more about that trajectory. But for the benefit of the audience, Aurora is currently a landscape designer at Curtis & Rogers Design Studio here in Miami, and the firm specializes in designing sustainable landscapes for a resilient future. Aurora is working on a very important project for the city, the adaptive reuse of Jose Marti Park, very close, next to the Miami River, and it takes on the question of how do you address sea level rise in a place that has so much cultural history and a really interesting mix of infrastructure, of community, of resiliency needs, etc. Aurora graduated in 2018, as I said. She swept the floor with all kinds of recognition and awards. She's talked about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion as part of ASLA conferences. And one of her specialties is I think you have a certification in the Waterfront Alliance, which is a waterfront design guideline, a really important project, which I think some of our students, I know I've steered a few of you in that direction. So welcome, Aurora. Great to have you with us. So we wanted to kind of take it back a little bit. We all have these, I think, unique trajectories that bring us to landscape architecture. So I wanted to know what led you to this field. What were you doing before you thought about landscape architecture and about coming to study it at FIU?
Well, hi all. I'm very happy to be here and share with you my trajectory and my experiences. Before I began college, let me first begin that I started as a freshman at 27, and I already had 2 kids at that point. I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years before that, and once they went off to school and my mom moved from Puerto Rico, I had enough support to then venture into higher education. I always knew I was going to do it regardless. Even if I had to wait longer, it wouldn't have mattered. And I've always been interested in anything that has to do with nature, sciences, arts. So before going to FIU, I was thinking, okay, what do I want to do? And I had different things in mind. I thought about biotechnology, I thought about marine biology, I thought about interior design. And that's what led me to go to FIU, interior design, because I was then accepted into the College of Architecture. And at that point, I was told that to get into the College of Architecture was very difficult. So I'm thinking, okay, I was debating, do I want to do marine biology, do I want to do interiors? I'm going to go with interiors because it's harder to get in. So let me go in, and then if I change my mind, I can always just go back to marine biology. It's a little bit easier to get into. Okay, so I go, and I didn't know this, but undergrad is architecture, not interior, not landscape. But I took classes, right? And one of the classes that really changed my perspective was the history of architecture with Professor Rick Kind. And he didn't just teach about the architecture per se, but he taught about the context. And to me that was so interesting because that tapped into, of course, the natural environment, but also the sociological. It's psychological, right? And how all of bad influences, and that opened my mind. At the same time, I took a class on South Florida ecosystems, and I went on these field trips, and I really started to learn about South Florida. And that's when I realized, I mean, you don't fall in love with a place until you get to know a place and understand the place. And so at that moment, it was like, I need to change from interior. I love design again, and I love interiors and all of that, but I'm like, I want to do something bigger and something that would have, in my mind, more impact to more, animals, the environment, people, everyone. And so that's when I approached Roberto at one point, and I started asking questions like, okay, so what do I have to do? What kind of work do we do? Like, is there even job opportunities for this? Because I didn't know much about it. And once I talked to Roberto, I thought about it very hard for a while. It was very, I don't want to say stressful, but a lot of internal struggle, because I knew that whatever path I took, that was going to be my life. And thinking about my life in the future, doing one thing or another, and how am I going to impact things around me, But then at the end, I decided to then go with landscape. I did, and I've loved it ever since.
The rest is history.
I am so glad I made that choice. I have no regrets. I love what I do, and I feel full doing it. So.
I'm curious, Aurora, you and I share a background. We're both from Puerto Rico. We're a small island. We think we're a lot bigger than we really are. And I wonder how that has shaped your view of this field and your impact, or just the impact of the field. Because an analogy there is landscape architecture in the grand scheme of things is also a relatively small discipline by numbers with a huge potential for impact. But anyway, I'm extrapolating that. But I wonder, from your perspective, coming from Puerto Rico, how does that shape who you are and your outlook in this field?
So Puerto Rico, at least for me when I go, it's like jungle looking. It's not landscape is not maintained the same way it's maintained here, so things are not square. Like the medians, things like that. And I feel that, at least me growing up in Puerto Rico, most of my time was spent outside and, going through creeks and going up, and, going to the beach. And so nature was part of growing up and not being limited. And my mom never put any fear in me for anything. So we go to the beach, or we would go to the rainforest, or we would go, and we would always playing outside. So. And also, my mom instilled in me, because back in the 80s and early 90s, there was this movement about, the ozone layer, and let's not throw away, garbage, because people used to throw away garbage on the street. But then this whole movement started, and she really instilled that in me. So I guess in that way, I always saw nature and humans as one, right? And so when I moved here, okay, I lived in Miami, in the city, blah, 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 but then when I started going to these field trips out to the Everglades, I'm like, oh my God, there's more than just concrete here, there's, and that kind of, again, it connected me, like, this is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. So when you say, and I agree, in Puerto Rico, there's this, I guess a word might be, there's more of an organic of things developing, growing, less plants. So was that in your mind, that you felt like that there needed to be a way to kind of create order out of this landscape, or it was just...
To me, it's not so much the order, but more about protecting, more about the protecting and understanding, and okay, how do you develop without really impacting it so much? So it can still be productive the way it should be.
Mm-hmm. So now, fast forward a little bit, the types of projects that you're doing now, clearly a big scale, a lot of really important, I think, agendas for resilience, like we talked about, sustainability. Can you pick maybe a couple of projects or talk to us about those and how you see your role in them, for example?
Okay. Well, when I was first approached by Mariana, she's one of the project managers at Curtis and Rogers. It was at one of the Florida ASLA award ceremonies. So then she saw my thesis, which was about sea level rise, and afterwards she just came to me and said, "Call me." At that moment, I was an intern at Kinley Horn. Like, listen, I'm already working, but if anything changes, I'll give you a call. Bueno, things changed. And so I gave her a call, and one of her pitches to me was the Jose Marti Park. And she was explaining to me, okay, she gave me the whole story about it. You know, it's a pilot project, the first of its kind in Miami and in Florida. We're going to be doing research on, you know, sea level rise, storm surge, flooding, you name it. And we're going to try and find ways to, again, it's a pilot, so to show that this kind of infrastructure, like the green-gray infrastructure, can work together and we can help the city adapt or protect it, or, you know, as sea level rises. So, and she told me, you know, you'll be an integral part of this because, you know, our firm is really small. Well, it's not really small, I'd say it's more like medium size, but, you know, it's just going to be her, me, Aida. Aida is the principal of the firm, and it's a great opportunity, and I said, okay, let's do it. So we did, and one of the things is we did a lot of research, something that we didn't, you know, I didn't practice in other firms. So the research part I really liked because that's, again, part of what I think should happen. We did a lot of analysis, and eventually we came up with a toolbox of solutions, replicable solutions. So the idea is once this gets implemented and we can show that it works, then any further development, at least by the water's edge, can be replicated. A part of that will be, we're also in talks with different institutions and nonprofit organizations to help us quantify the data before and after construction and see, you know, what are these changes? You know, are we creating really more habitats? Is the water cleaner? Is the, you know, we're trying to recruit oysters, or, you know, will it work? We're using new materials that hasn't been used. So, you know, it's a lot of experimentation happening. So,
I mean, it seems like the projects find you or you find your projects. I mean, because you have been working on these things. I remember we did a studio building that engineered wetland in Miami Beach. And I think there's probably something there. But I'm curious how you contrast what you learned in school, the way that you approached projects, or the way that you went through that process, and then in a real scenario like the Tea Park. Did anything surprise you about the process, let's say, or about, you know, how you thought about it as a student versus as a professional?
I guess it surprised me because of my previous experience at a different firm, right? Like, I thought the research did not happen. That's just what I thought. And so once I moved to this other firm and I see, okay, let's do research, inventory analysis maps, everything we did at school, we did here. I'm like, oh, I thought that once you start working, that didn't happen, but it did. And so that surprised me, how not everywhere you go work for or at, it necessarily do what you do in school. But if you're really passionate, you really want to do that kind of work, there are firms out there that do it. So to me, it was like that contrast.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. It's true. I mean, some firms, and actually, it's not always the case that it's directly correlated to the size of the firm, but the importance, I think, of the research and analysis in how it can influence design. I think that's a really important takeaway, for sure.
And trying to solve a problem, right? Sometimes, you know, you get hired and, okay, we need 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3, here you go. Right? Instead of, okay, you want that, but what else can we do? You know, is there something else happening? Let's look, let's see. And then maybe propose something better than what you are asking. You know, maybe you get a better return on investment.
Yeah.
You know,
How, I mean, in that project in particular, Little Havana, that context, how have you had a chance to be a part of that process too? You know, not just thinking of it as an outsider coming in to do analysis and inventory, but I'm assuming, you're also involved in these other on-the-ground types of activities.
Yes.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
So we've done community outreach. So that's my first day in the job, was doing that, community outreach. It was the first event that they held, and so we've done a lot of that. So that's another aspect. Collaborating with other disciplines. So we're working with marine engineers and civil engineers and biologists, and so being in touch with these people and understanding their part in how we marry all these ideas and make it work. I mean, sitting down on the table and drawing, right? And the different ideas, like, oh, that's not going to work, or maybe this will work. It's like that tracing and let's try it again, or whatever. And the different perspectives that every person has. And then comes, the permitting process and all the hoops and jumps and things. So when we started this project, you mentioned at the beginning the Waterfront Alliance. From the beginning, they went to the city and said, we want to implement these guidelines because it's like LEED certification for waterfront development. And they have several projects in New York that are already certified, but in Florida, none. So we will be the first one. And we sort of want to okay, let's make this, it'd be nice if it's the norm, but it's hard because they have a lot of requirements that are difficult to meet. So being part of that process has been trying to understand what the requirements, trying to figure out okay, how do we fulfill this? How do it's
because it's not just a technical solution. I think what's really admirable about that set of guidelines is how it really bridges the needs of creating public space with a functioning waterfront, with a place that's good for native habitat. Like there's all these intersections that have to happen that unless you're thinking about them at the beginning, you might solve one problem but disregard all these others.
Right. So as we're drafting and designing for this, we are always thinking about the water, the guidelines, and they are really good guidelines, because it touches on a lot of different aspects that need to come together for it to be a holistic way of doing it. It's not just, let's avoid water coming in. No, it's a lot more than that.
It's probably, are there other projects that follow the guidelines in South Florida? No. It's surprising considering how much waterfront we have.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a good pioneering opportunity.
Mm-hmm. At least not that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that. Any others. Great. So collaboration obviously very important, because you're dealing with now permitting agencies. I assume that's also a big sort of shift. We've talked in this forum before about how in a semester, you go from analysis and inventory all the way to like a formally resolved solution, but there's all these really important processes that have to happen along the way. So so you mentioned, folks who work in basically engineers or environmentalists. Like, what are some of the people that you collaborate with that are kind of essential to your functioning, in the office and the projects that you do?
Well, overall, I would say definitely engineers. If you're in the coastal engineers, architects, if there's a building, and we try to include the public as much as we can. So I see that also as because sometimes we go on site visits and they just go take pictures. But I like talking to the people that are actually using the place because they may say things that we don't even see or know, And then when you go back and you listen, honestly, they sort of need this, and we didn't account for that. So yeah, the people, the user. Yeah, I think that's
very, very important.
For the most part,
Yeah. What about? Can you speak speak a little bit about, I mean, the nature of the work, right? I'm assuming your work, you were always a hard worker, right? I'm assuming that has continued, and then some, right? So what are some of the hardest things and some of the easier things about what you do? What would you say is the hardest thing now that you've been out for a few years? Hardest to learn, hardest to adapt, hardest to get used to?
So, I just graduated 2018, not that long ago. But now, I would say in this past month and a half, I began taking on a more active role as a project manager. So that's a whole other ballgame. And trying to understand, what's needed, by when it's needed, who is involved, communicating, how much should I communicate or not, So that's been a bit challenging because it's all new to me, right? And, but, I don't want to say the same thing, but having been a mother and having to juggle school and everything, I think I've become good at organizing. So then that skill kind of transfer. And I'm also a very organized person, so. But it's definitely something different. It's something that I'm learning how to do, and it's a bit challenging. But
have your kids learned by now what landscape architects?
I hope so. I hope so.
It's always.
I remember when I was in school, I would ask my kids to do some CAD work. Like, can you just copy paste these squares? And then you can tell your friends that you know CAD. That would be so cool. You'd be the coolest kid in school. And I'm like, no.
So, we have students here, and you probably have access to your experience and things that you would do the same way, things that you would do differently. Can you talk about that? Put yourself in the shoes of a student now. What would you advise them?
Okay, well, I would advise try not to procrastinate. And I say try because procrastinating can have its good things and its bad things. But when you're towards the end and you're feeling that pressure and then you don't feel ready and you gotta present that, it's like, so if you can avoid that, I highly encourage you to. The other thing is take advantage of the resources in school. You have the GIS lab. I took GIS. I took a GIS class when I was in school. That was not part of the curriculum, but I still asked for permission. I was granted permission, and then I went, and I thought that was one of the best things I learned how to use. Ask for feedback from your peers. Present to your parents or family and see if they understand what you're talking about, right? Yeah. But challenges in school or challenges?
Well, I think that those are some really very important things, the idea that, in school, the idea of feedback for some, it can be a little threatening, right? If you're being critical about work, but I think, giving feedback, getting feedback, learning how to incorporate that.
Yeah. I would say don't take it personal, ever, because it's not about who you are, it's the project. That's nothing personal to you. It's like, okay, why not? And then take it in that perspective of people wanting to help you instead of bringing you down. It's like, okay, so now now you can make these changes, and then, it's nothing personal. And, once you go out into the real world, people are people. So learning how to just, okay.
Would you do anything different now with hindsight 2020 from when you started? Would you have still started in interiors?
You know what? I think the whole process has taught me. So I feel that, all of that, yes, have been necessary to where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I know that, I remember when we had these conversations and you were unsure about, whether to do it or not, but certainly that context almost gives you a hunger to prove yourself, and I think that was the case.
Right, because I think like everything, the way it happened and when it happened, it was meant to happen. So I don't regret anything. even taking a year off, I did take a year off, not off, I was a full-time student, but not doing like anything to do with architecture. And even through that year, I took a bunch of electives. And, you know, whatever, it's okay, it took me 6 years, so what? You know?
Yeah. So we'd like to open up the floor to students and have them ask questions. So let's jump onto that since we have a few of you here. Simone?
It's not a huge question, but I just wanted to know the size of the firm that you're working with instead of the medium size. What is that, like how many employees?
So it's about, I would say 10 to 12, off the top of my head, but around that amount.
And is it primarily women in your firm?
Yeah, it's a half and half, but it's led by women and minority, yeah. And so I agree with that. Yeah.
And the balance of projects, can you speak to that? Like what size, what type, what client?
Yeah. So we mainly do public works, like with the municipality, especially City of Miami, Coral Gables. Now we have big projects with the City of Hollywood and Fort Lauderdale, so we recently opened an office in Broward County so that we can take on more Broward County jobs. And some of them are small, like Merry Christmas Park. That's one of the parks that we're showing. There's a really small area at Christmas Park. But then, for example, in Hollywood, City of Hollywood, we're doing tidal flood mitigation for not the whole intercoastal, but a big part of intercoastal where Hollywood is. So that's huge, you know.
Other questions? Jack?
Do you guys ever handle anything dealing with like highways?
Yeah.
How like making them more like less destructive to communities or better for the environment?
So Curtis and Roger, I wasn't there when they did it, but the 826, the Palmetto Expressway, there's these, I think it's on 50, I don't even know the number, but 54, 34. There's these nodes where they have designed these type of wetlands, and they have instructed to not cut the grass. I mean, that's just one small part of it, but they planted a bunch of natives, and it's like a water detention area. And instead of just putting sod and some trees on no, it's like a whole ecosystem. They even left some snacks for birds to, create their little homes there. And it was also I don't know if the first of its kind, but definitely not common to do with an FDOT. I think it was an FDOT.
Yeah, that's, working in a regulatory environment with FDOT, that's a tough sell.
Yeah, it was a tough sell. And actually, me talking to other engineers are like, they can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. Well, they did it. And it's done, and it's working, and it's amazing and beautiful, and everything is flourishing. And when they go, there's pollinators everywhere. Like, that was the idea, to create, like, pollinator patches, kind of like the laboratory. It's... Yeah.
Have you done any post-construction analysis on, I would venture to guess that the maintenance is probably less because it is natives and it's kind of, a system that is innately sustainable because of that community. But do you know whether, have you done any analysis? I know that clients, and I'm sure at DOT, they'll have their end of project date and that's it. But I'm curious if that's, I don't know if you know of any analysis has been done to kind of prove the point.
No, but for MRT, that's going to be part of that.
Yeah. I think that's an area that's so important because it'll help us have the evidence to really be able to do a much larger impact, right? Which, it's happening, and I don't know if you've done any of the, I'm with the Landscape Architecture Foundation, the performance series, these are all projects that have basically a profile with analysis that really proves whether they are, and in what ways they're actually beneficial. I think that would be a great candidate. I'm happy to talk to you about that after, because I think it would be, if you think of the footprint of highway infrastructure, just changing that, 10% of it would be immense.
So when I joined the firm, they had already that in mind, that we were gonna follow those guidelines. And then in order to understand it, they sent us to this training. Well, at that moment it was COVID, so we did the training online. So we did, I think it was 2 or 3 days of training, and then you take a really easy test and then you get certified. And, but yeah, we're in constant contact with them to see, okay, you know, when we have questions or whatever. And yeah, so that was part of the thing about, you know, getting in here and working in this project. It was, let's get certified, let's understand it, let's implement it.
I mean, I think this is a really good topic because, Aurora, now that you're certified, I mean, these are kind of important ahead of the curve types of needs that we have, right? Waterfronts, again, if that's the only project guided by the wedge guidelines in South Florida, literally it's a blue ocean of opportunity, right? So you get certified in something like this. She started laughing about my pun, right? But in fact, if you develop an expertise in an area like this, knowing that there's such an immense need for that in the public space, that is insurance for your future. And I think that's a very smart thing to do. Do you have your eye on other areas? As is GIS, I might say. Before, we don't require it, but we certainly recommend that students, whenever they have electives, those are the ones that bubble to the top, because it's a skill that you can take to a firm and really leverage to your work. So, what other certifications or what other things are you
I'm
doing?
trying to get licensed as an LAEUD architect. So that's what I'm working on right now. I actually take test number 3 on Friday. So,
Awesome.
and then after that, I'll focus on, I want to become an arborist. You know, there's a list of things,
Yeah.
but one thing at a time.
One thing at a time. That's good. Well, you can tell Aurora is a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
She's proven that time and time again. Simone.
Have you, with the firm that you're at now, since you focus on sustainable design, have you guys had a hard time finding contractors and subcontractors that understand the vision and are willing to sign on to certain practices to make sure that it is a holistic project and it doesn't fall apart when it comes to actually building it and then doing it sustainably?
Well, so SMRT again is the first project that I've been involved at that magnitude, and it hasn't been built yet. Or been put up for bid. So for Merry Christmas Park, even though it was a tiny park, it was new. We used new materials as well, like organic log. We also use that for obviously, right? The organic log. I think it's the first part that has that. Yeah, that was tough actually. I mean, they did not sign onto it. They did sign up, but they didn't know what they were signing up for. So then once they started laying out, because you need a specific machinery for that, and then how do we do this? And it was difficult, but at the end they did it. And we were there, and then we had to draw the lines. Okay, no, you need to cut here. It was because it was a project that was everybody had their eyes on it. They did it. Like, okay. Yeah.
And sometimes that's what it takes.
Yeah, you just have to. And yeah.
Was it that you built the playground in the?
No, it was the path. So it's a walking path. Well, this is one example. I mean, this is a rendering, but this is. I don't know if the path was laid out here at this point. Maybe not. No, I don't think so. That's the base. But it's a permeable path, and so it has like this. Like a binder. So it's a binder, and so what it does is when it rains, it percolates. And then it's made out of crushed seashells or crushed gravel, so it's natural materials. It's not concrete or asphalt. So we started specifying it now, and I think maybe when these contractors sign up, they're okay, yeah. But then once they started making it, it's like So Merry Christmas Park, we used a different binder. because they did it wrong. And so we have to go back and we gotta fix this. And
I think this is if I can jump into the question, because I think that's the other really important thing to know. When you are in the field, you are in a position where you are the person that your client relies on to make sure that things are built, that are quality, that their corners aren't cut, etc. And that is something that you really have to feel, on the one hand, inoculate yourself with knowledge and experience and exposure so that you can speak authoritatively. But can you speak to that in particular? Because you're out there checking these things, like it's an uncomfortable conversation when somebody has spent however long doing something and they've not done it right. So, maybe you could tell us some anecdotes of that.
yeah, well, for example, for Merry Christmas card, we will go out there. This is an important part because one of the commissioners live right in front of it, so it has to. And the project manager would come out all the time too. But anyway, so we will go and see and take notes. We will take notes basically, and then go back to and sometimes we will be asking questions, okay. But then you go back to the office and you write these reports and show the pictures and show where in the plans we specify certain things where they're not following, and kind of use that as ammunition for like you have to. It's here. And so, yeah.
And the importance of, you mentioned this, the importance of documenting things properly. When you're out there, you want to make sure that whatever is said in the field is backed up by something in writing, in photos, etc.
And so something I did learn was put as many notes as you can on your drawings, because it can be misinterpreted. So one of the things that happened at our Christmas party is I put 3 feet wide minimum, right, and all throughout. Well, I guess they didn't read the part minimum, and then it was like 3 feet all throughout. And so what happened was there was a need for more planting because now the planting beds are bigger. And so, at the beginning the contractor we didn't know, but it says minimum, but it was also abbreviated min. So at that point, okay, I sat down and I thought about it, and I'm like, okay, it needs to be clearly stated on some sort of note, something, right? Or if I'm gonna put it, maybe I put 3 minimum in a place where it's 3, but then in a place that looks bigger, maybe I put the actual dimension, okay, 15 minimum, and be more specific. So something that I learned from that was that you need to be as specific as you can and label as much as you can without making it too confusing, because those are the sets of instructions, and you can't assume that they understand or are reading your mind, or
Yeah, and it's a legally binding thing too, where you have to make sure. And this is not a construction documents class, but this is a really important thing, because it also means that when you make those notations, you have to be very careful not to indicate the same thing in a different place there's a discrepancy, because any builder will go with whatever is most expedient, right? So if you give room for interpretation and you mention it in a couple, there's a lot of quality control that has to happen. But I think, you're spending time in the field, and that's a truly important part of, it can't just be you draw it and assume it's going to get built like you're rendering.
For Alice Wainwright, we had to go out and look at trees, and we looked at a lot of trees, and it took them a while. I think they got frustrated because we kept rejecting these trees. And then finally, once we decided, I think one of the trees they brought in wasn't even the one, and these are big trees, and I felt like, would they not, what do they do? How do we? No, they have to change it. So, anyways, it was I still am working myself to that point that I can be authority. I'm not there yet, but.
Well, we all work our way.
Yeah.
Trees to be approved by next.
Right. Yeah. Jen.
Could you tell us a little bit about Jose Marti? I've never heard of that park.
Alright, so Jose Marti is a park, Little Havana, and it's right next to the Miami River. I would say there's downtown Miami, and then if you go west, then it's in that area, okay? Right next to I-95 on the
You know where
west
it
side.
is? Miami River, the
Just
seafood
across from the
restaurant.
wharf, actually.
It's on the other side of the river.
So it's across from the wharf, you can see the wharf.
Yeah, there you go. It's across from the wharf.
Yeah, and it's, it's a community park, and there's a lot of, I would say Latin American population.
Say Domino's.
Yeah.
A lot of Domino's.
And at one point it was mainly Cuban, but now we've realized it's become more Central and South American.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's a really well-used park. There's a brand new gym facility there, really nice. They do
That's
events.
it. That's it, right?
Yeah, this is it. And, yeah.
Is the pool open?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the pool is open. Yeah.
Maybe one or two more questions before we jump into the rapid fire. Bryce?
I have a question about two of these pictures. One, hopefully it jumps up, but it's the one with all the islands. Is this the
Oh, okay. That's the fact-based study.
That was the study.
That was about it. Yeah.
Who commissioned it?
City of Miami.
City commission.
Mhm.
And what was the goal?
So the goal was the Army Corps of Engineers had come up with this report on how to mitigate storm surge, and their solution was to build a 15-foot high wall
Okay. You have the before.
all through the bay, Biscayne Bay, and the city was like, why? So then they hired us to look at different solutions to that. And so we partnered up with Cummings and Cederberg, which is also working with us at San Martin. They're the marine engineers, coastal engineers, sorry. And yeah, we came up with the idea of just putting these mangrove islands that can then protect from storm surge. Yeah. Like a wall.
This one.
Yeah, this one. And there would still be in certain areas walls, but not the whole bay. We wanted to put this 15-foot wall.
There it is. That was proposed.
So that was what was proposed.
Oh, the block review on everything you do.
Versus this. The power of the before and the after.
And this was the other picture I had.
This
Where's
one.
this tree?
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, this is when we did the Ace Legacy with Hebrew, the little Liberty City.
Liberty City.
In the elementary school, Liberty City. So our firm, we volunteered, and we volunteered, and we also sponsored it in part. So we went there. So that's another cool thing about the firm that I work for. We're very involved with the community and FIU, and yeah, we try to be involved.
Definitely. And a lot of our alumni,
Mm-hmm.
are part of it.
Yeah.
Self-fulfilling. Right.
So I was really curious about what you were talking about earlier with the living water ecosystem along the highway. And then you were mentioning the electric drive from WDOT. What do you feel like it would benefit more than like whatever their standard is? Like to whatever their alternative is, and do you think they're going to implement this more now that it's already been?
So it's definitely more beneficial because you have biodiversity, you're not cutting the lawn, things are flourishing, so there's more biomass, and that in itself is more beneficial. Whether or not they're going to do that more, I'm not sure, but that would be nice. And now that they have this one, they can see. People love it. I mean, I love it. And even driving through there, it feels different.
We have to do a performance series and get the numbers, and then you can kind of say, here's the evidence.
What were the reasons that they were thinking you have to do it?
Standards, like you have these standards that go back years. Could be, I don't know, for some reason. Honestly, I didn't work in that project, but I would imagine safety or
Usually it's supposedly safety everywhere, but it's really, and that you have to be understanding of that constraint, of course, but you also have to be willing to put in the extra work to prove how it can actually function and not be a safety hazard. So it generally means more work because the way that, I mean, think of the thousands and thousands of highways and roadways that are built that are under the jurisdiction of Florida Department of Transportation or any other Department of Transportation. They have their standards. They've been doing these for a long time. But they're, to go back to another thing we were talking about, it's about understanding the multiple constituencies that are affected, right? Not just good for the vehicles, but for the people, for the species. You know, we taught in the studio last semester about this, where it's about the Florida Wildlife Corridor and understanding that these corridors, yes, they will work to get cars faster from point A to point B, but they can, if they're not thought through, be very devastating for what's around them. So, yes, safety is always brought up as this, like, oh, it won't be safe if you put a native habitat. But at the end of the day, I mean, really more power to Curtis and Rogers because they actually implemented it. Now it's a matter of, I think, making sure that that evidence moves forward and we can kind of prove that. I have like a little inside joke about FDOT. I call them the FDONT, the don't. Because anything that we propose, having worked on a few projects, it's like, no, don't do that.
Well, like I said, I wasn't there, but I would imagine the same. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Mayor, just one more.
Yeah.
How do you think, like, us as a field or profession will be able to open the public's, like, minds more to how we can build, like, better communities and ecosystems?
So showing examples, I think, is a good one. And like you were saying, showing these metrics and showing, well, look at this, look at what it's doing. You just got to show the proof.
Right.
I think that's one very strong way of doing it. Other than that, take them out there, feel it.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's a really good point because, yes, I think, to the engineers arguing potentially against doing things differently, you need to back it up with data and quantity. But if you really want to move mountains, you're not going to do it with numbers. You're going to do it with people who feel passionate about where they are, the issues, for their kids, for their future. There's this famous quote, which I might have brought up before, by the author of The Little Prince, right? And I won't know it exactly, but it was something like, and it was done at a time when it was referencing, if you want men to cross the ocean, don't tell them what kind of saws and hammers and tools they're going to need. Talk to them about the allure of the ocean, about the poetry of the ocean, about this kind of just unexplainable idea of what the ocean is. And that ultimately is what drives us all, right? If we believe it passionately, viscerally, then it's wonderful to have numbers to back it up, but we're going to make it happen. And I think Aurora's passion, I think, in everything that you have done and continue to do, I think that's really admirable. So it's great to have you out there pushing ahead.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up with some rapid fire questions, which hopefully you didn't read.
I might have forgotten nothing or two.
So quick answers, so we'll jump right in. So Aurora, where would you love to travel next if COVID or budget was not an issue? Turkey, yes, beautiful country, absolutely. Favorite meal? What's your favorite meal?
Anything with plantains.
The Puerto Rican in you.
Yes. What's your favorite sound?
Cookies.
Cookies.
I don't know if you guys
Yeah, tell
heard
us.
it. Yeah. Well, it's just a little endemic frog that lives only in Puerto Rico, and so far here in Hawaii too. It has been taken there, but it sings at night.
At night, and you think of it, and we're back in Puerto Rico. I remember I went to school in upstate New York in the cold of winter, and when I went home to Puerto Rico to visit family, I used to record the cooking and play it in upstate New York in midwinter to all my Puerto Rican friends.
I have it there too.
So that, and then we did some mofongo too, so that helped. All right, what's your favorite musician or musical genre?
Bueno, right now I would say, I don't even know the name of the genre, but let's call it neo-ballads, like Spanish neo-ballads.
Like who do you?
Like Julieta Venegas, una
Oh, she's great.
She's great, pero Ile or, Check them
make the
out.
transcript and check them out. But Julieta Venegas is amazing. All right, what's your favorite non-landscape related pastime?
I mean, I like socializing. I like going out. Okay, I like going out. I like dancing. Yes. I like dancing, going out and talking to people about dancing salsa. Yes.
Awesome, very good. And you get exercise in the process too. So, okay. Do you have a favorite visual artist?
She's a landscape architect, actually. Her name is Rocio. And I don't know if you've met her. She didn't study in FIU, but she's a great artist and she does these line works. And she does a lot. She's from Dominican Republic.
Okay.
So a lot of her work is representing Dominican Republic, which in turn reminds me of Puerto Rico.
Mhm.
So I love her. I'll send you some
Yeah,
of her
I
stuff.
don't know.
It's
That's
really
wonderful.
good.
I'd love to see more of that. Okay, what non-landscape things are on your reading list or listening list?
Okay. Well, I started reading this book called Darwin Comes to Town: How the Urban Jungle Drives Evolution. Super interesting.
Who wrote it?
Yeah.
Where-
It's
where-
a European
Is it a
name.
scientist or?
Yeah, I think he's a scientist. So, but it's a good. I've been learning a lot. So I'm studying for the layer, so there's a lot of that. But another
Darwin
one
comes to
I'll
town.
send you a picture.
Okay.
Darwin Comes to Town: How the Urban Jungle Drives Evolution. It's anyway.
Wonderful. That's
I love
great.
anything to do with evolution. And it's called 19 Minutes. It's another book I've been listening to.
What's that one about?
That one is about, it's a little bit sad, it's about a school shooting. And the judge and the daughter and the people involved. That's for a book club that I'm part of.
Is it a nonfiction?
It's a nonfiction.
Nonfiction. Okay. All right. So, and finally, what do you do to disconnect
I love...
besides dancing?
I love once I'm done working, dim the lights, get a cup of wine, and cook.
Mhm.
Yeah, una musiquita, jazz in the background, I'm good.
So it all comes together. So the dancing, the mofongo. Just play some cookie recording.
Exactly. I have some music that does have the cookie in the background. Yeah, no, it's amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Aurora, thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you here again and meet and have a chance to talk. Let's have a big round of applause for Aurora. And thank you all for coming and staying. It's wonderful to be with us.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.